Okay, so we're going to be talking 6-5 today, which is linear inequalities. Okay, to graph linear inequalities in two variables and to use linear inequalities when modeling real-world situations is going to be our lesson objectives for today. Okay, A1.2.5 and A1.2.6 is our state standards. Okay, so problem one is just identifying solutions of linear inequalities. At this point, you should know that solutions just means that it's a point that works. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take 2, we're going to plug that in for y, and then we're going to set that greater than 1 minus 3. So we say 2, is that greater than 1 minus 3 is negative 2. And we say, yeah, 2 is bigger than negative 3, so we say, yes, that is a solution. Okay, and then we take negative 7 and do the same thing, negative 3 minus 3, and we say is negative 7, well, negative 7 greater than negative 3 minus 3 is a negative 6, and we say negative 7 greater than negative 6, well, this is backwards, negative 7 is actually smaller, okay, so we'd say no in this case. Okay, so is the ordered pair a solution of the y is less than or equal to 2/3 x plus 4. So 3/6, does that work? Go ahead and do that one. Okay, so key concept here, linear inequalities. Linear inequalities are just like equations and number lines. Okay, so when we do these, we're just going to be working through these just like if we were working through equations and number lines, graphing and solving. Okay, the only difference is that when you shade one side of the line in the coordinate plane. So the only difference is the number line look like this, where we would have a line, a point, and then we would shade one direction. And that would be our number line for inequalities. The difference for this lesson is we're going to have a Cartesian plane, a coordinate plane. We're going to have our line, but we're going to shade one side of the line. That's really the only difference. So it just makes it almost, I don't want to say three-dimensional, but it puts it back into that like two-dimensional type of look. Okay, so problem 2, graphing inequality in two variables. So to start off, we're going to put this exactly the same way that we would do in equals. Okay, now the only difference is that we would want to talk about what type of lines. So if it is one of these, okay, we're going to use a dashed line. If it's one of these, we're going to use a solid line. Okay, so solid line underneath means a solid line on our graph. Okay, no solid line means no solid line. Okay, so we're going to start up at going down 2 because our y-intercept is 2, negative 2, just like lines, just like graphing linear lines. Then our slope is 1, so we're going to go up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1, up 1, over 1. So there's our line. Now all we're going to do is we're just going to complete this line with a dotted line because there was no solid line underneath that. Okay, so there's our line as we draw it. Okay, so now we have to do some sort of shading. As you remember, I've told you earlier sections, anytime you have an inequality, you're going to shade. Okay, so we're going to pick a test point. This test point just needs to be on one side of this. Okay, we really should pick a test point over here as well. So I'm going to pick two test points. The first one I'm going to call test point A. What I'm going to do for test point A is I'm going to plug in that coordinate, which is 0, 0. Okay, so I'm going to plug it into the equation, and I'm basically going to do what problem 1 asked, see if it works. Okay, so I say 0 minus 2 is 0 greater than negative 2. We would say, yeah, 0 is greater than negative 2. So what that tells us is we're going to shade. If it's a true statement, we shade that direction. If it's a false statement, we shade the other direction. So if that would have been false, we would shade down here. Okay. If we test the B, just to show you, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 0. Okay, we would plug in 0 greater than 5 minus 2, which is 0 greater than 3. We say, well, no, that's not true. So therefore we don't shade towards the red dot, we just shade up here. Okay, so that's how we test where we shade. Okay, and that's the inequality. So that's what yours should look like. It should be some line with some shading. Okay, so go ahead and do got it number 2. Okay, let's look at problem number 3. What happens if we only have one variable? Well, this is easy. If you paid attention in earlier sections, what's it mean to be x equals -1? Well, that's a -1 on the x-axis, and it's a vertical line. So what that means is that's all you're doing. The only difference now is it's going to be dashed because there's no solid line underneath the inequality. So notice that there's no solid line. But now we just have to pick a test point. Now, fan favorite is always 0, 0 if it's not on the line. If it's on the line, don't pick 0, 0. Okay, it needs to be on one side, not on the line. So there's no y to plug in, but we do know x is 0. We say is 0 greater than -1. Well, that's true. So then we shade this direction. So everything on this side of that line. And there's your answer. Now there was no y to plug in, so that's fine. You just don't plug in a y. It's just an x. Okay. So now you have the y is less than or equal to 2. Go ahead and do that one. Okay. All right. Well, let's look at a story problem here. An interior decorator is going to remodel a kitchen. The wall above the stove is going to be tiled and is 3 feet by 4 feet, or 12 feet squared. Okay, and the counter is going to be wallpapered, which is 3 feet by 8 feet, which is 24 feet squared. The owners can spend $420 or less. Write in any linear inequality and graph the solutions. What are the 3 possible prices for the wallpaper and tiles? Okay, I want you to go ahead and try this one on your own. You can look at a reference on page 392. It'll walk you through there, but I want you guys to kind of get out there and start thinking about how to do these things on your own. Try not to look in your book until you're desperate and you have to use it. Okay, but I really want you guys to start picking up on how to take a story problem. We've gone through a couple of these that are very similar. Okay, just remember this is an inequality now. Okay, so you're going to have to use an inequality. Okay, so that's it for this lesson. We'll talk more. We got worksheets to do in class, and then you also have a pre-quiz to do before you come into class.